Today we're going to be testing out the Steam Deck with 20 different AAA games, but starting it off with GTA 5 at 800p and at a mix of medium to high settings. There we are. Right here I've got a 30 FPS cap as well. Normally you're going to be sitting at 40 to around 70 FPS. With a 30 FPS cap it will ensure us the most stable and most consistent frame rate possible, and it will reduce any stuttering that could happen with the uncapped frame rate. And also the temperatures and our power draw will also drop as well, so our deck will be cooler and will run for longer as well. Now as you can see, the game's running beautifully. We're getting a couple stutters here and there, but overall we're getting a lock 30. And driving up this hill here will give us a quite a bad FPS dip if you have grass enabled, but I'm pretty sure with medium settings you get no grass, so FPS should not be impacted too much. Yep, there we go, getting 30 FPS still. And our power draw is still at 2 watts for the CPU and 2 watts for the GPU, which is fantastic. Now, for GTA Online, the game's performance will be far worse. For campaign, you're going to be sitting around 40-ish to 70 FPS with these settings. But for online, you're going to be sitting at 40 FPS max. So, online, it will be far more intensive, but let's go and jump into that right now, and I'll show you guys how that runs in GTA Online. And here we are in GTA Online. Would you look at that, 30 FPS still. But as you can see, power draw is all the way up to 11 watts on the CPU and still at 2 watts for the GPU. So it's far more CPU intensive than GPU intensive. So your battery life will be far worse than online, and your performance will also be worse as well. So that's why I would go with a 30 FPS cap. It'll match the consoles, or PS4 and Xbox One. The quality looks pretty good as well. The game does stutter occasionally here and there, unfortunately, but we can, I guess, lower the settings a little bit to give us a bit more headroom, but I think this is a good balance overall. Right, let's move on to our next game, and I'll see you guys there. CYBERPUNK is our second game for the Steam Deck. We're going to be using the medium preset pretty much, with FSR set to balanced. Here we are in the graphics menu, using balanced FSR, and these are the rest of the settings. Alright, so going, we've got a 30 FPS cap in this game as well, but honestly, this is our limit. If you want to have a stable experience, 30 FPS is a must. You can get as high as 40 to 45 FPS with these settings, but as you can see, everything is pretty much maxed out on the CPU side and the GPU side. Now if you're watching this on a bigger screen like a TV or a PC monitor, the quality will look pretty bad, but on the Steam Deck's actual screen, it does look quite decent still. Now this will be a mostly 30 FPS experience. You might have some dips into the high to mid 20s occasionally, but I think for the most part, a 30 FPS stable is possible. Now the battery life isn't going to be amazing. As you can see, CPU is pretty much maxed out. GPU's, it's using up 4 watts, so it's not too bad either. But you'll get around an hour and a half, up to 2 hours battery life. But this all depends on where you are, what you're looking at, and what's happening on the screen at once. Alright, we're in this indoor scene now. I want to test this out real quick before we move on to our next game. This will involve some shooting, which normally will cause us to have FPS dips. But I just want to show you guys how this runs as well while in a combat situation. Alright. As you can see, we are getting 30 FPS. The game is stuttering a little bit as well, keep that in mind. Throwing a nade. There you go, a lot of particles on the screen. But yeah, as you can see, 30 FPS during the fight scenes as well. So a really good experience overall, and a very playable one as well. Alright, let's move on to our next game. So for our third game, we're on Elden Ring. Playing the game at 800p and at a mix of medium to high settings. Here we are with the settings menu. We have some settings on high, some on medium, and a couple on low as well. Alright, and I'm in the spawn area. This area was the most intensive throughout my playthrough, and it would give me the most consistent dips. So I'm obviously going to be here for a little bit. Now you can get around 35 FPS at the medium to high settings. At low settings you can get around 40-ish FPS, maybe 50 at times. But if you want to have the high quality game, you're going to be stuck to 30 FPS. At least a stable 30, which is a good thing. And the game feels really good overall, no stuttering, no lagging. This area used to cause a lot of lag spikes and stutters on actual desktop PCs, but after a while it's been patched and it's running beautifully. The game looks fantastic as well, it looks really good, even on a bigger screen. So you would imagine on the Steam Deck screen it will look even better. Now obviously if you leave this area and you go to those indoor areas, FPS will go up into the mid to high 30s, even at the medium to high settings. So this is pretty much the worst case scenario that I found in this game. It's this or the dragon fights. Dragon fights are very intensive as well. All the fire effects will be very intensive. Now for your battery life, I would not want to play the game at a mix of medium to high settings. I think playing the game at a mix of medium to low settings with FSR at 30 FPS is the way to go portably. But if you don't really care about the battery life, you're going to be plugged in, or you have a portable power bank, then this is the way to go. I think it's time for our next game, so let's go ahead and do that now. For our fourth game, we're on Red Dead Redemption 2. And we're playing the game at 800p. Alright, here we are in the settings. It's a mix of high, medium, and low. With FSR set to balanced as well. Alright, looks good. Let's jump into it. So, with this game, I'm going with a 30 FPS cap again. But with all these massive open world games, you can't really expect the most FPS or the most consistent FPS. We can get 40 FPS in this game quite easily, or 45 FPS at times as well, at a mix of medium to high settings. Or medium settings is more fair, to be honest. But it's not going to be consistent or very stable, especially in those heavily CPU intensive situations like those towns or cities. So again, we're going with a 30 FPS cap, but it should be quite stable. And the game's quality still does look fantastic as well. Getting a bit of hailing around Arthur, but on the Steam Deck screen, it looks far sharper. So again, no complaints for me. But yeah, overall the game does look really good and it's running decently well as well. Haven't had any stutters yet, but this area isn't really the most intensive, I would say. Now going over the battery life, this will heavily depend on where you are and what you're doing. In this area here, we're pulling around 3 watts of power for the GPU and 3 watts of power for the CPU, which will leave us around 2 hours and 30 minutes of battery life pretty much. Maybe a bit lower, but again in the heavy scene, this will fall down into an hour and a half battery life as well. Keep that in mind. So it's a wide gap, but it is what it is. This game is very intensive. For our fifth game, we're on the Callisto protocol. Playing the game at 800p and at a mix of medium to low settings. That was a pretty massive stutter, not a good start. Display at 800p for lighting, everything on low. This game has very intensive lighting, so again I would have it on low settings just to avoid any stuttering or FPS drops. For effects, we're playing pretty much on everything disabled. Anti-aliasing is really up to you. You can have TAA as well, but I'm gonna have it off. And for advanced settings, we're playing the game at balanced FSR, with everything else on medium settings. Okay, let's jump into it now. This area is the most intensive I could find without playing this game. Has a lot of fire, has a lot of lighting. Very intensive on the GPU. As you can see, we're sitting at 28 FPS. So again, I would go with a 30 FPS cap in this game. I know the FPS is uncapped right now for this video, but if you're playing the game seriously, go with a 30 FPS cap to avoid any stuttering or any lagging. Kill this guy real quick. Oh, sidestep, and you're dead. Let's kill this last guy as well, and then we can move on and talk about the quality of the game, the battery life, and all of that. There we go. And you're dead. Now, the game's graphics. It looks pretty good, I would say. Can't really complain about the look at all. There's no blurriness I can see. Everything looks pretty sharp. Looks very nice overall. The FPS, though, on the other hand, isn't really the best. Last time I played this game, it wasn't this bad. I could get a stable 30 going for the most part. But even in this area, I am getting some massive FPS dips, so... And just keep in mind that I'm running all these games off the internal SSD of the Steam Deck, so no SD cards or anything like that at all. So, it's all about the system. Yeah, the game is stuttering far more often at this point. I don't know what happened, but the game is running pretty poorly. It's very disappointing overall. This game was running very nicely on the deck like a month ago, I believe. And right now, it is stuttering, lagging all over the place. So, guessing an update broke it, or maybe a proton change ruined the performance. It's kind of hard to tell at this point, but I do have a video on this game, and it was running really nicely before. I'm out of ammo. Great, I keep forgetting. So at this point in the game's current state, we get an FPS range of 23 up to 45 FPS. Not very stable at all. The game stutters all over the place. It's very laggy. Not the greatest experience, but again, beforehand, like a month ago, the game was running quite nasty, so I don't know what happened. I'm sure they can fix it later on, but right now, I would avoid it. Alright, for our sixth game, we're playing Spider-Man Remastered at 800p with FSR as well. Jump into the settings real quick. Displaying graphics. There we are at 800p. With quality FSR. I think I said balanced before, and these are the settings we're playing at. Now this game is very CPU intensive, as you can see. It's an open world game and it's pretty massive as well, so can't really increase the graphical quality too much, but still medium settings is quite decent. We can go a bit higher as well to the high settings and still have a good 30 FPS experience, but honestly I wouldn't push it. I want to have as much headroom left over as possible to avoid any FPS dips. But yeah, as you can see, we're getting around 29 to 30 FPS, pretty much locked to 30, no stuttering, no lagging. I did experience some FPS dips in the homeless shelter, I believe, but you're only there a couple of times throughout the campaign, so it's not really a big deal. And it's only walking around anyway, so you're not really doing anything action-packed that requires the fastest reaction time. But yeah, overall the game's looking pretty fantastic, especially on the smaller screen of the Steam Deck. On the bigger screen, it doesn't really look the best, looks very pixelated and very blurry as well, to be honest. But again, on the handheld, looks fantastic. Now let's go ahead and go to Central Park. That area has a lot of foliage, a lot of trees, so FPS might tank there. But let's go take a look. So far though, we've had a perfect 30 FPS lock. I guess with some dips into the high 20s, but it's very rare. And here we are in Central Park. As you can see, game is still running beautifully at 30 FPS. No stuttering that I can feel. Very good experience overall. Alright, I think it might be time for us to move on to our next game. Alright, for our next game, we're going to be on Uncharted 4. Playing the game at 800p at a mix of medium to low settings. Here we are. No FSR as well, just 800p. Now this game you can go with the 40 FPS cap, but you will have some dips into the 30s as well, just keep that in mind. And in those super heavy situations, you will fall down into the 20s also. So, wide FPS range. I think to be safe, I would go with a 30 FPS cap anyway, but if you want a more responsive game, you can go with 40 FPS. But just keep in mind that the game might have some dips into the 30s. We haven't had any stuttering yet. The game is running beautifully. Oh, we are getting some action in this area right now. Bad timing to say that.
I'm being shot at.
Gotta sneak past these guys.
I know.
And again, that's why I would go with a 30 FPS cap, just to avoid any of this stuttering crap. Intensive with all the vegetation. We're pulling around 6 watts of power for the GPU and 5 watts of power for the CPU. So it's quite even between the two. And FPS is still sitting in the 30s. I forgot what key did what. It's been a while. Okay, there we go. Gotta get behind this guy. He's gonna see me. Poke him out real quick.
On my way.
Alright, I think that's about enough for Uncharted 4. Let's move on to our next game.
Yeah.
So it's the next day now, and we're moving on to our next game, which is Forza Horizon 5. Playing the game at 800p with the medium settings. So let's jump into the settings real quick. Then graphics. Here we are. It's pretty much the medium settings. We can go a bit higher as well, obviously, but again, I just want to have some headroom left over so we can have a stable experience. Now right here we're using a 30 FPS cap, but with the uncapped frame rate we can get around 40 to 50 FPS at times, even 60 occasionally. But again, I think the most stable experience is at 30 FPS in this game. So as you can see, we're pulling around 2 watts of power for the GPU and around 2 to 4 watts of power for the CPU. So it's a good balance between the two. Our battery life should be pretty good as well. We're going to be getting around 2 hours and 30 minutes of battery life with this. And obviously at those settings, 60 FPS is doable, but again, not very consistent since we're sharing power between the CPU and GPU. So occasionally you get power limited and you will fall below 60 FPS. Now occasionally you will see the FPS drop down to 29 FPS. That's normal, it's the FPS cap doing that. If you uncap the frame rate, you'll go far above 30, so you're fine there. You have plenty of headroom. And the game's overall feel is pretty good as well. There's no stuttering that I can feel at all. Maybe occasionally actually we do get some, but I think for the most part it's running really nicely. Alright, let's move on to our next game and continue from there. Alright, our next game is NFS Unbound. Playing the game at a mix of medium to low settings with FSR unbalanced. Here we are, FSR set to balanced, and these are the rest of the settings. Let's jump into it. Now in this game you can get above 30 FPS as well, but again, the smart thing to do is to go with a 30 FPS cap, because in races the game will be far more CPU bound and you will lose your performance there. So, alright, I'm gonna go ahead and drive to a race so we can test out the racing in this game, because in VRAM it is quite light. You can get above 30 FPS, but again, those races is where the Steam Deck's gonna struggle the most. And if you're wondering about online as well, the Steam Deck can play this game online with no issues as well. Now the problem with all these racing games is that 30 FPS isn't the most responsive. You want to get at least 40 to 50 FPS, that most responsive car handling. But still 30 FPS isn't too bad. It's still definitely usable. And handling feels fine. You can get used to it for sure. But yeah, ideally you want to get 40 plus FPS for racing games. But as you can see, the game is not stuttering at all. It's running beautifully at 30 FPS. You will get some freezes and stuttering when you open the game initially. But after a couple of minutes of playing, the game will smooth out and the stuttering should go away the rest of the play session. Dark Souls 3 is our next game. Unfortunately, I've lost my save. It doesn't have cloud save, I believe, in this game, so we've got to start fresh on the Steam Deck. We're playing the game at a mix of medium to high settings. Here we are, a mix of high, medium, and shadows on low. So if you go with a 40 FPS cap, you can push the settings a bit higher than this, but I think for me this is a good balance, and we're going to be getting around 50 FPS on average, with some dips into the mid 40s. The game's running really nicely so far. We got a couple of stutters, but I think for the most part it has run really well. This area is quite easy, but we play for a little bit longer so we can actually see how this runs. This is the first game I haven't done a full video on, I believe, so I can't really reference anything on how the game ran beforehand. But so far it's running really nicely. So at this point we're pulling around 8 to 9 watts of power for the GPU, which is pretty much maxed out, and around 3 to 4 watts of power for the CPU. So portably, this isn't very ideal. You're going to be getting around like an hour and a half at most of battery life. If you cap your FPS to 30, you'll have a far better time portably. But I think ideally for portable play, I would go with a mix of medium to low settings at maybe 30 to 40 FPS. And you should have a pretty nice running game with really nice battery life as well. Look at this. This first loss has nothing on me. Okay, bad timing. Heal up real quick. That was very laggy. We dropped that into the high 40s. Give me the... No, I misclicked. I pressed the back buttons. I gotta disable those. The back buttons got me screwed up right there. Okay, we're getting some massive FPS tips here. That's why I would go with it. Cap the FPS of 40. Oh. There we are. That was a bit close. The game was lagging a little bit with the uncapped frame rate, but I think overall it was running really nicely. So with these settings, you're going to be getting around 45 to 60 FPS. 60 FPS isn't very stable, so I think 40 to 50 FPS is the sweet spot. And your battery life isn't going to be the best with these settings either, but you know what? The game looks really nice, so it's really up to you. And yeah, let's move on to our next game and continue from here. Alright, playing Dying Light 2 now with a 30 FPS cap. Playing the game at a mix of medium, low, / high settings. But I'll use the left stick to actually control it. Here we are. We're gonna go to advanced settings, low, low, medium, and high. There we are, perfect. Alright, I've decided I'm gonna use FSR as well, using the ultra quality preset. The game still looks fantastic, no blurriness to the game at all. I don't like the motion blur to be honest, so I would disable that personally, but on low settings it's still fine. Now, although I've capped the FPS to 30, you can get around 40 to 45 FPS in this game quite easily, especially with FSR. But like always, I think for battery life reasons and for stability reasons, 30 FPS cap is the way to go. But yeah, overall it's a really great experience. The game looks fantastic and performance is also really nice and very stable. No stuttering, nothing like that at all. And yeah, let's move on to our next game. Alright, now GTA 4, we're playing the game at 800p with a mix of medium to high settings. These are the graphical settings. Let's get going. So as you can see, we can't get a stable 60. We will get some dips into the 50s. But the game is still running really nicely. So I think for this game, you can go with a 40 FPS cap or a 50 FPS cap. And you should have a decently smooth experience. That's not a good start. Yeah, I guess this car is done for now. I'll leave it here for you guys to fix. And I'll be taking this new ride. Actually, you know what? I'm going to keep going. We gotta get out of here. The cops are gonna pull up.
Respect my space, son.
So yeah, either a 50 FPS or a 40 FPS cap would do the job in this game. 30 FPS as well is obviously doable and usable, but I would only use that for battery life reasons. You know, if you want to save some battery life, then I would go with a 30 FPS cap. That was so loud, that screaming. So this game is very CPU intensive, so as you can see we're pulling around 10 watts of power for the CPU and only around 2 watts of power for the GPU. So the FPS dips are due to the CPU not being powerful enough, running out of power, being power limited I should say, and not because of the GPU. This game looks fantastic on the Steam Deck, no issues there at all for the quality of the game, and the performance is really good as well overall, but an FPS cap is needed to have the most stable experience possible. Alright, I think that's enough for GTA 4. Let's move on to our next game. Alright, and here we are in The Witcher 3. We're using the Darkness 11 mode, because you have two options in this game, Darkness 12 and Darkness 11, and by default it's just going to choose Darkness 12. And the problem with that is that the game will be very CPU bottlenecked, will be very CPU intensive, so I'm using Darkness 11 at 800p, and going to the settings right now, graphics, and here we are. It's a mix of medium to high settings. There we go. And I'm going with a 30 FPS cap, but you can obviously get far better than this. You can get around 40 to 50 FPS depending on where you are. At Novigrad you're going to be sitting around 35 to 40 probably on average. But once you leave the city, you should get far better performance. So here we are outside the city. This will be far more GPU intensive rather than CPU intensive, but still a 30 FPS lock is doable with very little stuttering. So with these settings, as you can see, we're sitting at around 40 FPS outside of the city. It's very nice, very playable. Game looks fantastic as well. Really high quality. Wish we could use Darkness 12 to use FSR 2.0, but we can't really do that because the game isn't very stable, still very laggy. But hopefully in the next couple of months it'll get fixed up and will run far better. But as it is right now, I think Darkness 11 is the way to go. Just choose it in the game's launcher at the start and you'll be good to go. Alright, I think that's about enough for The Witcher 3. Let's move on to our next game. Alright, here we are in Doom Eternal, playing the game at 800p and at a mix of medium to high settings. There we are. A couple are on low as well, obviously. Alright, let's jump into it. So we're getting 80 FPS. This is great. Almost 90 FPS as well at times. We are going to have some dips into the 60s, obviously. It's not going to be a perfect 80 FPS lock, but I think you can get 60 FPS for the most part in this game, with occasional dips into the 50s. Wish we had aim assist though. We don't get no aim assist in this game. Punch this guy. The wide FPS gap from the mid 60s all the way up to the high 80s, but I think for the most part it is running really nicely. Let's keep going. Oh, it's shooting at me up here. Got this guy heal up quickly. There we go. So yeah, here we are. We're dropping down into the mid 50s right here. But again, I couldn't really tell that the FPS was dropping. The game was still running decently well. But I think for this game, a 50 FPS cap or a 40 FPS cap, it might be the way to go. Now, if you want to save some battery life, then play the game at a 30 FPS cap or a 40 FPS cap at low to medium settings. And you can even lower the resolution and enable FSR to get a bigger headroom on your GPU. Alright, we're in Horizon Zero Dawn, playing the game at 800p. Display, here we are, using FSR at the quality mode. The aspect ratio is wrong, but it doesn't let me use 16:10. But you should be able to do it properly, mine just bugging out. And then graphics, we're playing the game at a mix of medium to low settings. Now, on the big screen that I'm looking at, the game doesn't look the best at all, but on the Steam Deck, it does look quite decent still, so just keep that in mind. And 30 FPS for this game is a must. Anything above that, the game will start stuttering, lagging, and it's not very stable. So yeah, 30 FPS for this game is the way to go. And this game will still have some stuttering issues when you're loading into new areas, for example, but I think for the most part, it should run decently well. Getting 30 FPS pretty much the whole time. As you can see, we're getting some FPS dips right here into the mid-20s. That's the main issue with this game. The game will stutter no matter what. It's very CPU intensive, so that's what really is causing us to have those FPS dips. This bridge over here is a guaranteed way to lose FPS. Let's just go across it and you'll see the FPS dips once we load into there we go. There it is, yep. This game is decent, it runs okay I guess. You will have some FPS dips into the mid-20s. If you're cool with that, then this is definitely playable. But I think for most people, it might get a bit annoying. Alright, let's move on to our next game. Our next game is Resident Evil 8. Just went ahead and reloaded an early save. And we're playing the game at a mix of medium to high settings. But mostly medium. Here we are in the settings menu. Go ahead and increase the settings as well a little bit. Using FSR with the quality preset. There we go. And here we are getting almost 70 FPS in this area. But I've seen it fall down into the mid-40s as well at times. So just keep that in mind. This is going to be a locked 60 with these settings. You can obviously go ahead and lower the settings a little bit more. Try and get locked 60 FPS experience. I see them. But yeah, I think a 40 to 50 FPS lock in this game, again, like all the other games, is the way to go. Someone's up here, man. I don't want to push up. It's been a while since I played this game. Give me that. Hello. Okay, okay, okay. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. Oh my god, they're just eating me one by one. Off me, get off me, get off me. But the quality of the game does look quite decent still. Looks really nice even with FSR enabled. And FPS is doing really nice. No stuttering yet. But again, just cap your FPS a little bit so you can have no stuttering. Oh my god, I'm dead. So you can have no stuttering and no lagging in those heavier scenes. Do we not get aim assist in this game? I guess not. Oh, we do get aim assist, it's just not very strong. I'm absolutely dead here, aren't I? Okay, I got infinite health. I'm getting shanked. Biting. I'm out of ammo. Oh no, I'm out of ammo. This is kind of difficult to play on the Steam Deck. I can't even lie. I'm praying. Don't come inside. So yeah, overall, this game is quite intensive at times. With these settings, you will be getting 40 to 70 FPS. So I think the smart thing to do is go with the 40 FPS cap. But overall, the game looks fantastic, even with FSR set to quality. So overall, a great experience. And yeah, let's move on to our next game. Alright, now we're in ARKHAM Knight, playing the game at 800p with a mix of medium to low settings. Here we go. So for this game, I'm going with a 30 FPS cap again, but you can get away with using a 40 FPS cap as well. That is also playable, but occasionally in those heavily congested city areas, you will drop down into the mid-30s. So that's why I'm going with a 30 FPS cap to avoid any FPS drops and any stuttering that could happen. It's overall a great experience. I've done a full video on this game already, so you can go check that out if you're interested in this. And yeah, looks good, runs good. Just gotta make sure that you cap your FPS, because with the uncapped frame rate, the game will lag and stutter like crazy. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our next game and continue from here. We only have 3 games to go, I believe, or 2 games to go after this, so we're almost done. So our second last game is AC Odyssey. Playing the game at 800p at a mix of medium to high settings. Here we are. Looks good. Let's continue. So with this game, I'm going to be getting around 35 to 60 FPS, maybe even 70 at times, depending on where you are and what you're looking at. But on average, you're going to be sitting around 40-ish area for your FPS. Now, I think the safe thing to do is to either go with a 40 FPS cap or a 30 FPS cap in this game. 40 FPS is a bit more risky, but it is still doable, so you can use it if you want. But if you start having FPS dips, then go ahead and use 30 FPS, and you'll be fine there. Alright, here we are in the main city area, sitting at 42 FPS with some dips into the high 30s. As you can see, the GPU and CPU are pretty much fully maxed out. The clocks aren't fully maxed out. They're sitting at 3 GHz on the CPU, and GPU is sitting at 1 GHz. So it can be a bit higher on the clock side, but we are getting power limited. So at this point, this is the best we can get. And that's why I was saying before, a 30 FPS cap might be necessary because the game is stuttering right now and falling below 40 FPS. But if you want to go with a 40 FPS cap, you can lower the graphical settings to medium and low, and you might be able to get a stable 40 at that point. But yeah, overall, this is a pretty good looking game, really great experience. But again, you need a 30 FPS cap for these open world games or the game's going to stutter. Alright, move on to our next game. Alright, so our second last game is FIFA 22. Running the game at 800p. Our rendering quality is set to medium, and MSAA is set to 2x as well. Alright, let's get going. We're getting over 130 FPS. This is at medium settings, so I guess we could play the game at the higher preset and still get a great experience. I wouldn't want to play this game portably at 130 FPS, but you know what? It's good that we can do it. But yeah, I think for FIFA, 60 FPS is probably a must, but I think 40 FPS is probably usable as well, I would say. 30 FPS is probably pushing it, but I think for portable play, might want to use 30 FPS to save as much battery as possible.
This looks promising. Useful ball to the near post. And a goal!
What a goal.
And they've turned this game on its head.
Now for our final game, we're playing Days Gone at 800p with a mix of medium to low settings. These are the settings we're playing with. Looks good. Let's jump into it. Now for this game, I would go with a 30 FPS cap. You can get 40 FPS as well for the most part, but again, those FPS dips are going to get kind of annoying. But if you don't mind that, then you can go with a 40 FPS cap as well, and the game will be far more responsive than playing the game at 30 FPS. Oh, that was weird. But yeah, this game looks fantastic at these current settings at 800p. And 30 FPS is quite easy to handle as well. Shouldn't have any FPS dips or any stutters as well. So I think overall will be a great experience while looking good at the same time. Then use FSR to lower your resolution as well. And then go with a 30 FPS cap. And hopefully you can get a decent battery life out of this game. I do have a full video on this game already, but I'm not really sure if I did a battery portion of the video. But let's go ahead and take a look at it. I already have it done. But yeah, this video took over 12 hours to make pretty much, over 2 days. It's kind of rough towards the end. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time for the next video.